Welcome back. So in the first part of our video tutorial series on Azure DNS Private Resolver, we have discussed the objective of the tutorial series wherein we have an on-prem DC and DNS server in our left that would like to be able to resolve the private DNS names of the virtual machines in Microsoft Azure in our left side. So also in reverse, so the Azure virtual machine will also need to be able to resolve the private DNS names of the server in our on-premise environment. For the second part of this video tutorial series on Azure DNS Private Resolver, we will settle first the underlying network infrastructure, wherein we will create the virtual networks. As mentioned in our first part, we will create the on-premises environment still in Azure as for simplicity's sake. So this particular network will be created as a different virtual network. And of course, for our Microsoft Azure side, we will create a different virtual network for the hub. And for the purposes of this video, we'll only create one spoke VNet, and this will be the CIDR block for that particular VNet. However, we will have some modifications to what we have presented in the first part, wherein we will use the /24 CIDR. So instead, on-premises virtual network, we will make use of 192.168.0.0/16. And for this virtual network, we will have two subnets. So one subnet is intended for the server subnet that will be for our future DC and DNS server, and we will have our virtual network gateway subnet for the future virtual network gateway appliance, or the component wherein we will create a site-to-site VPN from the on-premises quote-unquote virtual network to the Azure network. So similarly in our Azure network, so instead of /24, so we will make use of /16 on our hub virtual network. And in the hub virtual network, we will have three subnets. So one for the virtual network gateway subnet, and one for the inbound subnet for our Azure DNS private resolver, and we have also the outbound subnet. And finally, for our virtual machine network, so we will have the spoke 01 in preparation. Perhaps we will change our mind and create another spoke 02. So for now, we'll have spoke 01 virtual network, and we will have one VM subnet for this spoke virtual network. So we will follow the naming conventions for our virtual network, starting with the word VNet. So then the subnet will have the SNet. So let's start with our quote-unquote on-prem environment, and we will create the virtual network. So we have created a resource group. So we have RG Azure DNS Private Resolver, descriptive name for our resource group for this video tutorial series. So we'll go and click create, and we should be able to search for virtual network. And among the choices here should be virtual network. So virtual network here, not the virtual network gateway, but we will use it later. Okay, so we have the create virtual network, and these are the tabs. Basic, security, will go each of them. So we have the correct subscription, resource group, and we will follow our VNet name. So VNet-main on-prem. So for the purposes of this demonstration, we will be using this region, Southeast Asia. So there's nothing much here under basics aside from the name and region. So we'll click next. We don't have network encryption for this video tutorial series. Then the IP address, so this is where we will allocate the CIDR block and the subnet. So since the default that was given is 10.0.0.0/16, the address space, but our on-prem, if you can remember, is 192.168.0.0/16, so we will delete this address space, or we could also change from here. So if it allows to change 192.168.0.0, so /16, so it allows to be modified. Next will be the subnets. So remember, we have two subnets, one for the server and one for the virtual network gateway. So since the subnets have the default, we can also edit this, and we have also the IP address range. So we will make use of the first subnet will be our virtual network gateway. So let us see if we'll be able to have this gateway name, or we will later on the Azure will comply us with the gateway name. But for now, let's have this VGW on-prem, and we will choose a starting address. So remember, we are 192.168.100. Then it should be /27. All right, so subnet is for the default. Okay, we could also choose virtual network gateway, but like I said, now it's gateway subnet, so we will use this one instead of what we have, wherein we type in snet VGW on-prem. So instead we will have this and /27 and 192.168.100.0. okay, so we will click save. Next is we need to add another subnet. So here we could also add the subnet later, but since we are given this opportunity to add a subnet, then we could also add a subnet here. So let's add the server subnet. So click add a subnet, and the subnet purpose, there's no Azure virtual machine, but instead Azure default only. So this is Bastion, Firewall, Management, and Route Server. So the name, so now we could really name it as SNet. So SNet Server on-prem, and instead of this 99, so we could have 100, but /24 will overlap to the /27. So we will make use of .64/27. Okay, so it does not overlap to our virtual network gateway subnet. So we don't have any other settings from here. In the future we will, for example, security group, etc, etc. So for now we will settle for the subnet purpose, the name, the subnet, because we will be under this CIDR block for that VNet that we have created. So let's click add. Alright, so in Azure we have created 192.168.0.0/16, which is for the on-prem quote-unquote virtual network. For our gateway subnet, we could not have our name as SNet VGW on-prem because it requires this name. And for the virtual machines, yes, we could have customized subnet name SNet server -on-prem. So if the addressing is correct, then we could go on and proceed and click next. And we could have tags, for example. Let's again, best practice is to put some tags. Does not require for us, but again, for the purpose to show you. So let's say this is on premises. Okay, but you could put in your tags as the cost center, whether it's production or UAT or development, and so on and so forth. But just showing you that that's the tags purpose. So next, and it will be reviewing if the virtual network that we have created is accepted. So validation passed. So we have chosen this subnet, CIDR for the virtual network, and we have two subnets that non-overlapping, and there are many tags because it will also tag the other resources. So if it's okay, let's click create. So deployment is successful or is in progress, and your deployment is complete. already. So let's go to the resource. So we have this virtual network. So VNet main on-prem. So under Southeast Asia region, the address space, and it has two subnets. So let's go to settings and address space. So this is where your address space is. Then we go to subnets, and basically we have the gateway subnet, so 192.168.100/27, and the snet hyphen server on-prem will be 192.168.10.100, that's 64/27, and you have the available IPs, etc., etc. So basically we're done with the on-prem virtual network, and we'll proceed for the virtual network for our Azure side. So we are back in our resource group view, and we have our first virtual network that is created. So we will create two more. So first we will have our hub virtual network. So click create, and we will still find or type in the virtual network. Okay, so we have the virtual network here. Let's close this and let's click create virtual network. So this will be for the Azure side. So same subscriptions, same resource group, and we will have for VNet Hub Azure. Okay, so same region, and let's click next. No security or no virtual network encryption for the purposes of this tutorial. Address space, so still has that default 10/16, and we will change this to our subnet or our VNet address space. Okay, so alright, so ours is 10.100.0.0/16, and we will create 3 subnets. So this one we will edit this, and again we would like to have a name like SNet VGW Azure, but since in virtual network gateway you could not edit the name, so we will proceed with this. So this address range is okay, but we will not use this size, but we'll just use /27. So no other settings from here, so click save. Okay, so realize that the gateway subnet should be 10.100.100 and not 10.100.0.0. So we will edit this, and let's edit this part. So 10.100.100.0/27. So save, and we will add 2 more for our inbound endpoint subnet and outbound endpoint subnet. So add subnet. So now it's default. There's no option for those inbound endpoints or outbound endpoints or Azure DNS, so we will select default. So with this we could name our subnet properly to as what we have in the diagram. So inbound, if just for short form for endpoint. So let's have 10.100.100. so it overlaps because we have a /27. So for our inbound we'll have the /27, but 10.100.100.32/27 for our inbound endpoint. Okay, so let's click add, and we now have the subnet for our inbound endpoint. So we will create the subnet for our outbound endpoint. Let's click the add a subnet. So SNet out E, and 10.100.100. So this time it's .64/27. Okay, so there's no overlap on the other 2 subnets. So we have the gateway subnet and the inbound endpoint subnet. So this is the outbound subnet. So click add. So just double check. So we have 10.100.0.0/16. Then we have the gateway subnet 10.100.100/27. and we have that 32 for the inbound endpoint, and we have the outbound, which is that 64/27. So click next. Will be tagged, so there is now a name. So let's say this is the environment is in Azure, and click next. Of course, you could put owner, again cost center for cost and billing purposes, but again that's not covered within our tutorial series. So click next. It will go to the validation again. So one more review, we don't need this for now. Bastion, firewall, and DDoS. All we need is our underlying virtual network and its subnets. So click create. And your deployment is complete. So one quick check before we proceed to our Spoke 01 VNet. So this is our VNet Hub Azure, wherein our virtual network gateway and the endpoints will reside. So the address space is correct. We have 3 subnets. Settings, subnets. We have the gateway subnet. We have the inbound and outbound subnets with their subnet block. And that should be all right, and we'll proceed with the Spoke VNet. So same drill. I will not discuss so much anymore because you have seen it on the first. Just click create, and let's just find the virtual network and create the virtual network, and let's have the VNet correctly. So VNet Spoke 01 Azure. Okay, so let's select the next. No security. IP addresses, we'll just change it to 200 instead, /16. So we don't have any default gateway here because it's the Spoke VNet. So our subnet will be the VM here. So let's change this one. So the subnet purpose, there's no for virtual machine, so SNet, we'll choose the default, but we will rename the name. So SNet Spoke 01 VM Azure, and we have 10 200 200, so we'll edit here. And since we don't have any in this virtual network, so we could have the /24, and that should be okay. So click save. So let's review 10 200 00/16 for the VNet address space itself, and the subnet we have only one, which is for the virtual machine SNet Spoke 01 VM, and the address is 10 200 200/24. So click next. So for the tags, we already have environment, we already have Azure, so click next. Validation, hopefully it passes, and click create, and it will initialize deployment, and hopefully finally we'll have our VNet in some point. Okay, so deployment succeeded. Your deployment is complete. Let's go to the resource. Let's close this notification, and we have our VNet Spoke 01 Azure with the correct address space with only one subnet, and the subnet is this VM Azure with the correct IPv4/24 subnet. So we have finished creating the virtual network on our on-premises as well as our Azure part. So we have the Hub Virtual Network and Spoke Virtual Network and the on-premises virtual network. Now what's left for the part number 2 of this video tutorial series is to create the what we call virtual network peering. So if you could see here, the Hub Virtual Network is being peered to the Spoke 01 virtual network. Of course there's another one, but we will just focus on the one virtual network peering between the hub and the Spoke 01. So the name of the virtual network peer from the point of view of the hub virtual network is peer hub to Spoke 01, and that will be reversed from the point of view of Spoke 01. So peer Spoke 01 to hub. So we are back in our resource group view, wherein we have the 3 virtual networks, but one for the on-prem, of course. So we will create the virtual network peering. So it will be under the VNet configuration. So we will click one of the virtual network. And if we scroll down under settings, so we will have peerings. So of course settings must open up because we have look at the subnets. So under settings, so you just scroll down and click the peerings. So of course there is no peering connection for this virtual network because this is a brand new virtual network. So we will just click add to create a new virtual network. So in configuring peering, so you have basically 2 sections. One, what will be configured on the remote, and the other one will be what will be configured locally in your virtual network. So local virtual network summary, as well as the remote virtual network summary. So peering link name, as you can remember, so we can have the peer. This will be on the point of view of the remote, so spoke 01, and we have the VM, we have the 2 hub. Okay, so this will be the subscription, and we will create the virtual network. So we will peer on our spoke, so VNet spoke 01. Next will be the settings. Okay, so although we will configure it today or for this particular part, but when we create the virtual network gateway, we will need to revisit this peering section. In that way, that will be fresh to your understanding. But for now, since we are creating the peering first and without those virtual network gateway, we'll just select what we can for here, and later on we will just modify the peering configuration. So for example, remote virtual network peering, so allow VNet spoke Azure to access VNet Hub Azure, which is of course we want to. Allow VNet spoke Azure to receive forwarded traffic from the VNet Hub Azure. We would like it to have the forwarded traffic, especially the Hub Azure is forwarding traffic from the on-premises. So allow gateway or route server in VNet. So there's no gateway or route server in this VNet because we only have VM, virtual network. So enable VNet spoke Azure to use VNet Hub Azure remote gateway. Again, we will just check this later on. Okay, for the purposes, we'll just check the 2 and we will just reconfigure it if it's necessary. So next will be the local virtual network summary, wherein at the point of view of this VNet Hub Azure. So we could have peer hub to spoke 01. So next, local virtual network peering settings. So allow VNet Hub Azure to access VNet spoke 1. Of course, we need to check yes. So allow VNet Hub Azure to receive forwarded traffic. So although the spoke will not have any forwarded traffic, so we could check yes or no here. So for now, let's leave it blank, or we could check yes. Okay, allow gateway or route server in VNet Hub to forward to VNet spoke. So there is a gateway here, but okay, we can check. So let's say VNet Azure does not have a VPN gateway yet. To enable this option, it needs to have. So okay, so let's uncheck this one first. Then enable VNet Hub to use VNet spoke Azure remote gateway. Again, there's no remote gateway on the VNet spoke 01 Azure. So for now, let's have the 2 settings first. So as long as the peering names are correct, we are okay. So let's click add. So we seen here added the virtual network peering and also added another virtual network peering. So again, it will be both sides. We only configured one, but later on, as I will point it to you or show it to you, it will be on both sides. So the local virtual network summary is correct. So we are from the point of view of the Hub Azure, peer hub to spoke 01. So fully synchronized. The peering is connected and we only have one spoke VNet. So remote virtual network to the VNet spoke Azure, and that is now configured on the hub side. And then we could go to the virtual network of the spoke side to verify. So we could go to settings and we go to peerings. So take note, we never configured it here. We only configured one time on the hub. But again, if you have seen the configuration, it will have the remote and the local. So the remote side, so peer spoke from the point of view of spoke to hub, is fully synchronized and connected. So for now, we will end on this particular configuration for part number 2. We could not test if indeed this peering is really working functionally because we don't have any VM or any resources to really do a test. But the peering is connected and fully synchronized on the spoke to hub, and we have also configured the virtual networks on our Azure side, so hub and the spoke, and the main for our fictitious on-prem, so quote unquote on-premises, but again for simplicity's sake we'll have it configured in our Azure as a separate virtual network. So catch us on our next video for the part 3 of this video tutorial series on Azure DNS Private Resolver. Until then, see you.